Hi, everybody watching this. I'm Amber. I work for the foundation. I'll let our other two guests introduce themselves really quick.
My name is Holly Van Houten. I'm a Scholar Relations Coordinator at the Terry Foundation. I specifically work with students at UH, UTD, Texas Tech, and UT Austin.
And hi, everyone. My name is Colton Hattersley. I was a 2013, well, I guess I shouldn't say was, I am a 2013 Terry Scholar from UT Dallas.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I guess I should say what I do for the foundation. I'm the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement. I'm also in charge of Terry Connect, which is probably where you're watching this video. So Holly and I were just wanting to have a chat this evening with Colton so you guys can learn what life has been like for him after college. But Colton, before we get to that, can you tell us, going back to your college years, like what was your major? What were some interests you had while you were in college?
Sure. So I started at UTD as a political science and economics double major. Very quickly changed to focus on sociology. I was really interested in issues of equity, centered around policy and how governments can really help in the progress in the movement for social equity for LGBT community, for racial minorities, and other groups that have suffered oppression from systems like government. Throughout my college career, I was pre-law, and in my very last semester, decided not to go to law school, and hopped on a plane, moved up to Seattle, and enrolled in grad school instead.
So when you were at UTD, I know that you did some research and you did some slam poetry. Can you tell us a little bit about other things you did outside of, changing majors and graduating and moving and finding a grad school?
Yeah. So like Holly said, I was a research student. I helped with the first ever statewide needs assessment for the LGBTQ community in Texas. That report was published and is used by nonprofits in the region who are trying to seek grant money to provide services to LGBTQ plus Texans. I also did slam poetry, competed a couple of times, won the first time and placed third, I think, in another slam. And I was very heavily involved in both mock trial, which is a debate-like competition where you practice fake trials in front of real judges and lawyers. And I was heavily involved in the UTD Terry Scholars Student Association. I served as an officer for my sophomore and junior year, was heavily involved in freshman enrichment and mentorship.
So y'all, can you talk a little bit about your mentor program that you guys had at UTD in the Terry program? Because I know it's different at each school. So
yeah, so as part of the onboarding process, if you will, for new scholars at UTD, one of the first weekends after school starts, all freshmen are taken on a retreat. Back then we went to Glen Rose, Texas, spent a weekend at a bed and breakfast and had a really good bonding opportunity. There was a set of mentors who were sophomores and up who would give talks on a variety of topics, from how to survive college, how to adjust to not being around your family all the time, how to not spend your entire stipend in the first 2 weeks of school.
Kind of important.
Yeah, that one was very helpful, surprisingly. And then also just relationship building, getting to know people who either study the things you do or have interests that you do, so that when you come out from the other side of the weekend, you are not feeling quite so alone and like you're being dropped into this really massive, really awesome and important organization without ties. So I went as a freshman, loved it so much that my sophomore year, I was elected the freshman enrichment coordinator who helps plan the retreat, plan mentors, and sustain programming for freshmen. And then my junior year, I was one of the mentors who went on the trip, didn't have to do any of the planning, just showed up, talked, and got to enjoy the really delicious brownies that that bed and breakfast served. Anybody who was there with me knows that the chef brought me brownies, like, especially because I would not stop talking about it.
Awesome. So, I mean, it sounds like you had a lot on your plate in college. How do you feel like you handled all of the different things that you were involved with and kind of dividing your time and, you know, making sure that you were sleeping enough and, you know, rewarding yourself with a brownie whenever you had you had a good week or a bad week, maybe? Like, how do you feel like all of that worked out for you now that you're on the other side of it?
I think there were some things I did really well, and there were some things that I probably should not have done. I was very much of the opinion at the time that if I had free time, I should fill it with something, that keeping myself busy would keep myself engaged, that if I was constantly either in a club or volunteering or going to competitions, that I would be okay. I would have friends, everything would work, my grades would be fine. So I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then by my junior year, frankly, I felt burnt out. It was a really hard lesson in reconciling to have, because I think for many Terry scholars, we're all super ambitious. We all really care about a lot of things. So we can push ourselves harder than we probably should. So just the lesson from then, and even now, having gone through grad school and now being a professional in the world, trying to remind myself, hey, mental health is important. Breathe. Yeah. You don't have to do things 24/7, and it is okay to reschedule if you need time to just exist and take care of yourself.
That is so true. I find myself, like, especially these days, sitting down and being like, I'm not reading that anymore, or I'm taking time from that to focus on something more positive, or eating a brownie, or whatever is necessary for that self-care. I know that you did a lot while you were at UTD, and you mentioned that you moved out of state and went to grad school. Can you tell us what program you chose and what kind of led you there?
Yeah. So 4 days after walking the stage at UTD, I hopped on a plane for Seattle, Washington. I did not have grad school acceptance. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I had a friend's couch, and I decided that was enough and that I was just going to fake it till I made it.
I was about to ask, why Seattle? Like, what was the driving factor there? Just you had a friend there, or?
I had friends up here. I knew that I wanted to live in a place that was completely different from Texas, just to expand my worldview. Mm-hmm. And I could not think of a place in the United States that is more opposite to the state of Texas than Seattle, Washington, with the rain and the cold and just the way that people exist and operate. Mm-hmm. I catch myself sometimes, because growing up, like, if you needed a cup of sugar, you'd go next door and knock on the door. And that's not something that you do in Seattle. People don't really make eye contact or wave or smile in the same ways that they do in Texas, but they support each other in other ways. Very community driven, very huge nonprofit landscape in the region. So there's no shortage of volunteer opportunities, of ways to really support communities in general, but especially marginalized groups, which has been a huge passion of mine.
That's cool. So once you got up there and you were on your friend's couch, then what happened?
Well, I started applying to grad programs. There were 2 schools in Seattle that I was looking at: the University of Washington, which is one of the best schools in the country for most things, and the university I ended up attending, Seattle University, which is a private Jesuit institution that is very social justice driven. It's in the mission. All programming, educational and non-educational, is filtered through this lens of how do we treat the person as a whole person? How do we really establish and practice our commitment to other people and lifting them up and challenging oppressive systems and supporting equity. Because of my background in sociology, I knew that I wasn't going to find a practical job as a sociologist unless I went to a PhD program, which going into my master's degree, I planned to go straight to a PhD afterwards. But I ultimately landed on a master's in public administration because that would allow me the opportunity to, if not work in government, at least understand governmental systems, where they are successful, where they fall short, so that I could combine my love of sociology with my passion for things like government that can improve the lives of others.
Yeah.
And so I started, I think, mid-June was my first class. And I was taking the bus back and forth. It was about an hour and a half trip one way. So I was doing nights and weekends, online classes when I could take them. And I ended up graduating in August of last year.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
So then, do you have any advice for somebody who's thinking about being a Texas transplant somewhere else?
I think the number one thing I would say is, if you truly feel like it's what you want, then go for it. As I was in the months, weeks leading up to it, I would talk with my friends, Terry scholars and non-Terry scholars. And I think that because we are a Terry family and because you develop such close bonds with other scholars, there can be an element of people trying to discourage you from going, which is okay. People don't want to see their friends fly across the country. But if it's something that you actually want to do, you have it in you to do it. And it can be scary, it can be weird, it can be really uncomfortable. Like I said, sleeping on a couch for the better part of 3 months wasn't what I thought I was going to be doing with my life post-graduation, but now I'm in a place where I'm working full time. I just moved into a new apartment last week. And all things considered, life is going pretty well for me. I'm very fortunate. And I don't think I would have been in this place if I had not just taken the risk to hop on a plane with 4 suitcases and a dream, if you will.
So it sounds like you're in a good place now. What is your job like now? What are you doing currently?
I work for the city of Bellevue, Washington. It is the 5th largest city in the state. If you were in the DFW area, I would say it's similar to Plano's relationship to Dallas proper. I work in our finance and asset management department doing performance analytics and process improvement work, really trying to teach and skill build around how you use data to make decisions, how you analyze data, collect data, understand information, so the decisions you make are the right ones and aren't purely political.
Yeah.
And then as part of that, evaluating processes so that you're doing things as efficiently as you can while having respect for the people doing the work, which in a global pandemic, when state and local governments are struggling due to revenue offset, becomes really important work just to, at the end of the day, keep you breathing. Workload since the pandemic started has been immense. It's been really difficult. And Seattle was the first region to really be hit in the country. So we've been dealing with this since late February.
Yeah, it sounds like right now your work is very important, but that it's also a way that you're pulling your research background and your public administration background all together into one job to help others, which has kind of been your common theme all the way through. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing. I know it has to have been stressful.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So what has life looked like for you since February? Like how is it different in terms of the way that you work or the way that your team works?
It was very difficult to adjust to, in part because I was hired into my current role mid-January. So I was still training and doing onboarding and trying to adjust to new aspects of the work that I do when all of this hit. Uh, Early March, I flew down to Louisiana for a wedding. And when I came back, I was told, don't show up to City Hall. You're staying home. You're working from home. If you have everything you need, you can make one trip to the building to get whatever you need. But other than that, stay home.
Wow.
So since then, in our former place, I was sitting at the kitchen table every day, working from 7 a.m. to 4:30. And now that I'm in our new apartment, doing the same thing in a different space.
Right. So one of the things that I think that makes me want to ask you then, because there are a lot of people, I think, in this community that are now going to be stepping into a new role or are in a new role in a time of uncertainty or in a time of upheaval, and we really don't know when things are going to get back to whatever normal, right, is going to look like. So, I mean, do you have any advice for somebody who's trying to navigate like a significant change in their job, for example, whenever there is something like this going on where, there's just a lot of uncertainty around it?
Yeah. There are a couple of things. First, the same themes I was talking about throughout my undergraduate career. You have to first and foremost be kind to yourself. Give yourself permission to fail sometimes, because I think as people, we're all going to fail in some way. And as long as you can be okay with that and think from the lens of, this is an opportunity to learn, to improve. In the world of performance analytics, we call it embracing the red. When you don't meet the target condition that you're trying to meet, just embracing the fact that, yeah, we didn't get there. And that's okay, because we have plans for how we're going to adjust to try and actually get to where we want to go. So self-care, grace are very important. I think there also a degree of trust and vulnerability will also be key. As I was in meetings onboarding with my supervisor and other teams, I was honest on days where it was really, really hard for me to absorb information, to, in some cases, even just get out of bed. Because when you're home every single day and there's no change, it can be really easy to slip into bouts of depression or just low moments where even the most mentally healthy of people can't absorb and process information. So being able to say, I appreciate that we're doing this right now. I will probably have to have follow-ups because I am struggling right now, was essential. And the third thing I would say is be creative. Think about what you have at your disposal and how you can leverage it. We have had to do a lot of meetings over Skype, over Zoom, as I imagine many people listening have. It can be used in really cool ways, and you might not realize how cool they are until you talk about it with others. We, for example, as part of our process improvement work, use visual management systems so that we can understand visually what's going on, so that if my department director walks by, she can see on my visual board the status of my major projects and whether or not things are falling behind. In a virtual space, you can't easily do that unless you get creative. So we came up with some strategies for meeting monthly, having people visualize using different kinds of tools. And as part of those conversations, I was talking about it with a group of people who meet from different parts of the country. And just this morning, I presented on the work we've been doing to Durham County in North Carolina, because they're looking at trying to leverage virtual spaces for this kind of work. at the time, I didn't think it was that creative or groundbreaking, but stepping outside of myself and thinking from the lens of a different organization, it's pretty cool work. And I think that it can be leveraged across different industries to really just help you keep track of everything that's going on. Because, yeah, I mean, looking around my desk and seeing all the sticky notes that are here, I know that I left a bunch of them at the other place when we moved. So you have to find some ways to just keep track of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, especially the creativity. You mentioned that you had to move recently. What kind of creativity did you have to bring to that process?
It was not moving like I did when I left Dallas. I think first it took a lot of pre-planning because we moved both during a global pandemic and while peaceful protest movements are occurring across this entire region. So it's acknowledging what's going on. It's navigating to make sure that you can travel safely, that you're not putting other people's lives in danger. And the thing that actually helped me the most was I had a calendar and I wrote 2 rooms or things or spaces on each day. And so by the end of the day, it was, okay, Tuesday, we're going to do all of the pots and pans that we don't need for the rest of the week. And we're going to do all of the bathroom stuff that isn't sitting in the shower.
Yeah.
Just being able to cross those things off was like, okay, we're slowly getting there, slowly able to get the boxes stacked so that when it came time to load up the U-Haul and go, I wasn't still throwing things in trash bags at the last second like I was when I left Dallas.
Yeah. You've mentioned we a couple of times. I just want to take a second and say congratulations on your engagement.
Yay.
Thank you. Again, very exciting times and weird times to have everything kind of hit all at once.
Right. I wanted to take a step back and just commend you on the point you made about stepping outside of yourself whenever you're looking at the way things work for you and trying to decide if something is innovative or creative, because I do think we tend to be our own worst critics in a lot of ways. But I think we also tend to really focus on what's directly in front of us, and we forget that the familiar for us is not necessarily the same, or we might look at something from what we think is a very obvious angle until we see that somebody else just hadn't even considered it. And so really to not count yourself out in terms of thinking that you have a solution to offer. This is just weird times altogether, and that everybody's having to be creative and everybody's having to adjust and think outside the box of what even they thought was possible. I mean, even in terms of the way that we function at the foundation, trying to think about working from home versus like truly working from home and being efficient from home, and redefining what things like productivity even mean, but also just thinking through something that I think works for me that might seem obvious isn't necessarily going to be obvious to somebody else because they have a completely different lens they're trying to look at it through, and a completely different set of factors. So I think that's awesome that you kind of had that cross-country collaboration really that you were able to do.
Thank you. Yeah, it is so important to remember that we're all human, we don't know everything, and to ask questions. There have been so many things that I'm starting to incorporate into my own routine day to day because I'm having conversations with other people. I was talking to a coworker an hour ago about just life and how stressful it is generally, and when you're doing massive things like moving and not being able to go to a store to buy furniture that you don't have, or to get dishes and things that you need to use to live, because here in King County, Washington, we're still on total lockdown. Restaurants are closed. If it's not a grocery store, it's probably closed. And the advice she gave me is, I've been having similar struggles. What I've been doing is keeping a gratitude journal every day, writing down something that I'm thankful for something good that's going on in my life, so that when those really hard, stressful times come, you just open the book and flip through and remember that, yes, things are dark. Yes, things may be scary or confusing, but there's still so much to be thankful for.
Sure.
So that's now going to be my new daily thing. I'm going to put sticky notes all over my desk so that I can remember that, yes, things are hard, but there are also so many great things going on in my life that I have a lot to be thankful for.
Right.
So do you feel like, and that this definitely sounds like something that you're wanting to make like a permanent addition to the way you do things, but are there other things you feel like you started doing during the pandemic that you would like to continue doing now that it's part of your routine?
I think so. I'm still trying to feel out certain things. One of my goals for 2020, actually my New Year's resolution, was to do one creative thing a month. Early on, the idea was I'd go see a play, or I'd go paint something or draw something, pick up different types of artistic skills. Then the pandemic happened, so I have not gone and done plays and different things, but it's helped me reconnect with other artistic mediums that I love. I've started writing poetry again for the first time since I moved up here. I've started painting from home and trying different artistic things. So it's healing, it's cathartic, and it's fun. So I think it's something that is going to be carried forward as just another hobby and another thing to fill time that is for the sake of it being fun, not for the sake of filling time, because I feel like I have to stack every waking minute of my day with something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that one of the creative things that you enjoyed when you were at UTD was the Hamilton soundtrack. So I'm sure that you've already added to your July to-do list to watch it when it's on Disney Plus. I know I'm excited about it. Thank you for sharing that with me back then.
No, yeah, I had just canceled my Disney Plus subscription because I wasn't using it very much when they announced that. So it's like, okay, let me take a little bit of a break because I don't need to sit in front of the TV only watching Disney Plus. But it will be back when Hamilton's back, because and what a great time to be watching and consuming Hamilton.
Right.
So you repeated something that really resonated with me earlier, and I think that is a common thing amongst Terry scholars, but I think amongst working professionals and students in general, is our tendency to equate like how busy we are to maybe how we view our success, or looking at our worth or appraising ourselves based on just how busy we are, and not necessarily the way that we're filling that time, or how that time being filled is allowing us to take care of ourselves. So yeah, I think it's great that you found those creative outlets, and that you're diving back into hobbies and things that were a place to center yourself before, and just to help break up the monotony of working from the same place that you live, and all of that, all of just all of the factors that come into that, not having that separation of space like you would if you were commuting to and from an office. So, but yeah, it's a big thing. And I wish that I had the answer for how you cannot just look at how busy you are and then think that that's like the metric you're supposed to use. But it's just such a common challenge. It's being mindful of it too, and mindful of your own tendency to say, am I doing enough? And then ask yourself like, okay, but what is enough? Like really, like what am I basing that off of? So
I 100% agree. The mindfulness thing, I think, is important and is hard. The word enough has always been a word that bothers me, because it does, if you're somebody who feels like you just have to keep going, that enough is going to be the match that lights everything that goes off and makes you just keep burning yourself out. There is no clear answer, but I think I would encourage people, especially in quarantine, especially if you were laid off or furloughed or don't have employment right now, don't feel like you have to fill every waking moment of your day with something that is productive or that society deems is valuable, because this is a weird time, and it's also a great time to just remember who you are, to fall back in love with yourself, and to really just rediscover things about yourself that you know, or to discover new things that you didn't know. That yes, now might be a time to develop a new skill you can put on your resume for when all of this is over, but it's equally important to just be kind to yourself and love yourself and take space that is for you, in service of you, and not necessarily for anybody else, because I think we all deserve and need those moments to survive, especially in isolating times.
I agree. I think that is a really great message that all of us need to hear right now. Is there anything else that you want to say to other Terry scholars or alumni, either about yourself, about your experience, or how to get involved?
I think in general, if you are considering a career in government and have questions, I'm happy to connect through Terry Connect. All my contact information should be there and up to date. It's, again, really strange times. We have to remember to be kind to ourselves and just think about why you're a Terry Scholar. Think about where you came from and how that might influence where you're going. I know whenever I was a Terry, I was doing a lot of service. I was doing a lot of extracurriculars and a lot of different things. And when I graduated, I didn't expect that I was going to be able to sustain levels of service that I did when I was at UTD. But even throughout grad school, I was able to find time to volunteer, because when I wasn't volunteering, I felt like that piece of me wasn't active, wasn't there. And so just being able to reconnect with the fact that there was a panel of people who believed in me enough to give me a full ride to college, to give me the opportunity to learn and grow and meet people that expanded my horizons in ways that I would not have had in Corpus Christi, Texas, where I grew up. And that's really shaped the arc that I'm traveling on right now, to be able to pay it forward as somebody working in government, trying to help make decisions data informed, and on the side, being able to work in equity spaces within my organization, support things like our city marching in the Seattle Pride Parade, or having really tough conversations about racism in the LGBT community, about the intersections of race, gender, ability, and police violence. That there's just so many things that if I had not been a Terry Scholar, I don't think I would have been able to do now. So just remember where you came from and let that help guide you if you're feeling lost.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, those are some great words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I want to thank you for, being willing to help and putting yourself on Terry Connect as somebody who's willing to talk to fellow scholars, whether they're students, whether they're alumni, and, taking the time even to just chat with us today to remind people just who's out there in this community too. I mean, there's Terrys in every field you could imagine, and with just a wide range of life experiences. And I hope that somebody was able to connect with multiple things that you said today. So again, just thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I'm going to go ahead and cut off our recording, but if anybody else is interested in meeting Colton, learning more about what he's up to, please make sure that you reach out to him on Terry Connect.